request that most of you who are here, I request you all to switch on your videos, please. It's really difficult for a teacher to teach with just the black squares on. So it'll be good if you could keep your videos on and your mics muted. Can I start, Venerable Kalden?
Yeah, do you want to start or maybe just give people another 5
Wait
minutes?
for another 2-3 minutes. It's 10 to, shall we wait till 10:05?
Yeah, let's do that, yeah.
Okay. How is the weather there, Venerable Kalden? All okay? Is it
Yeah,
raining?
it's fine. It rained yesterday evening, yesterday night. It's pretty good. It's getting colder now. Cold, as in relatively. It's a little maybe at night, maybe around 18, 19 degrees at night.
And have your exam started, Venerable Kalden?
No, they will in a week's time.
Oh, okay. All right. So we have Madhvi also joining in. Nicole is joining from San Francisco.
Right.
Shyama's here. Hello, Martin. Are you based in Bangalore?
No, I'm based in Coimbatore, Tamil Nadu.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
One more minute and we'll start. Venerable Kalden, do you want me to share the prayer book online on screen?
You can, it's okay. It's I have a presentation prepared for the session today. I'll share that. Most of the stuff that we need to do is there.
Okay.
So, can you enable share for me? Oh, it's enabled, yeah.
Sorry?
Okay, it's enabled, yeah. 1 second.
Okay. Just requesting everyone to keep your videos on. It's really hard for, as I'm a teacher, so when I do my online classes, most of the time, students keep their windows closed. It's extremely hard. So keep your videos open and your mics muted, please. I think I'll start now, Venerable Kalden. Is that okay?
Okay, yeah.
So welcome to you all, and welcome to Venerable Kalden for joining us from Seraje. Today our teaching is online, and also because Venerable teachers are prepping for their winter debate, debate exam coming up shortly. So despite all of that, Venerable Kalden is here to teach us session 5 of Introduction to Buddhist Meditation and Philosophy. Thank you so much. This is, of course, based on the Lamrim model. Thank you, Venerable Kalden.
Okay, Namo Buddhaya to everyone. Anirodham Nikwadam Nuchedam Shashvatam Anigadam Ipraditsamutpadam Prapancha Pashmam Shivam Deshamasa Samudastam Madhyapadatam. Okay, good morning to everyone. And I think Nicole is in a different time zone, so good evening to her. So as Deepti just mentioned, we are continuing, we are in the 5th session of this course where we introduce different meditations to participants from a text called The Path to Enlightenment, Bodhipath, The Path to Enlightenment. So as you're familiar with the contents of the text, what the text does is it gives us instructions and practical methods to conduct a spiritual practice. Starts off by helping us awaken our spiritual affinity into the different lineages, whether it is the Shravaka lineage, the Pratyabhuddha lineage, or the Bodhisattva lineage. So you start off with that, and then it presents the different stages through which you need to progress to actualize whatever state of enlightenment you seek, whether it is the enlightenment of the Shravaka or the Bodhisattva. So the path, the various paths that you need to ascend through on this in this process towards attaining the final state of enlightenment is presented there. So it starts off by giving instructions on how to cultivate what is called guru devotion. So that is the foundation of the practice. And then it goes on to explain things like the preciousness of human rebirth, and then the fact that it is characterized by certain kinds of liberties and endowments, and then also about the immediacy of death, the inevitability of death, and then it also gives instructions on how to think about the general and the specific sufferings that characterize samsara or our existence. And then it kind of takes on from that point and helps us acquaint our mind with themes that can help us expand our minds into concepts like compassion, altruism, equanimity, and before also in order to cultivate these attitudes of compassion and universal altruism, you need to combine your practice of compassion with combine your practice of universal altruism with what is called the wisdom of selflessness. So these are the things that are presented in the path to enlightenment, the Bodhipath, as it is called. So we, in a previous session that I had at CKSL, we discussed one part of this outline, which pertains to the description of the suffering nature of samsara. So specifically, we had discussed what is called the Four Noble Truths, and within that we had discussed the first two truths: the truth of suffering and the truth of the origins of suffering. And then Venerable Legden, in the previous session that we had, he would have covered things that I just referred to, like the cultivation of mindfulness of death. And then he'd also covered the importance of refuge and these kind of preparatory practices. So in today's session, what we're going to do is we're going to discuss training that is, when I presented you the outline of the Bodhipath Pradeep, it actually gives instructions in training which relate to people with different kinds of spiritual maturity, and spiritual aspirations. So there are those people who aspire only for a good rebirth. So they make up what is called the trainees on the lower scope. There are those people who seek to be liberated from suffering in samsara. So they make up the trainees on the middle scope. And then there are trainees who aspire for the state of omniscience, and they make up the last part, the trainees on the greater scope. So the Bodhipath Pradeep gives instructions on all these different trainings. So we've kind of covered the first part. So what we're going to do is elaborate on the second part, the medium scope of training, the middle scope of training. And in that training, we need to understand what it does, what this training helps us is to understand the process that would eliminate the causes of samsara and help us liberate ourselves from this cycle of birth and death in samsara. But in order to be able to do that, what we need to do is we need to have a good understanding of what suffering is and also what are the causes of suffering. So we briefly covered that in our previous session. So we're going to elaborate on that discussion in today's session with a discussion on what is called the 12 links of dependent origination. So the 12 links give a very specific kind of formula which explains what are the factors, what are the principles that perpetuate this cycle of birth and death and then rebirth in samsara. So we'll discuss that in detail, and also as part of this session, I'm supposed to cover the 6 types of sentient beings, which we have covered in the previous session, but I'll refer to that during the discussion. And then I'm also supposed to cover the 4 immeasurable attitudes and also cover bodhicitta, how to cultivate bodhicitta using the 7-fold cause and effect method. So that would pertain to training which is specific to the trainees on the greater scope path. So before we do that, just like we did in the previous session, let's start off this session by doing a short meditation. And we'll continue with the meditation that we've done in the previous session, which is mindfulness of body meditation, and specifically mindfulness of breath. So this meditation is called Anapanasmriti. So Ana means out breath and Apana means the in breath. So focusing on your breath, in breath and out breath, and using that, how we can cultivate 4 different kinds of mindfulness. It's actually with just one object, with just one technique, there are 4 different kinds of mindfulnesses that we speak of in text. So all those different mindfulnesses can be cultivated within this meditation technique. And not just that, this technique will also help us understand how we can train ourselves in the 3 higher trainings, the trainings of morality, the training of meditative stabilization, and the training of wisdom. So those are the things that we'll do in the first part of the meditation. So the meditation will be split up into 2 parts, like we did in the previous session. The first part will just try and cultivate concentration. I'll give you specific instructions how to do that. And then in the second part, we'll in between the first part and the second part, we'll discuss the 12 links of dependent origination and the other stuff that we are supposed to cover in this session. And then in the second part of the meditation, we'll try and relate the instructions that we see through the discussion, how we can incorporate those in the meditation. So let's begin with the meditation. So make sure that you have a proper posture. So if you're sitting on the floor or cross-legged position would be the best. A full lotus posture would be ideal. If not, maybe a regular sukhasana would do. And importantly, make sure that your back is absolutely erect. Make sure that all your spinal discs are aligned. All the vertebrae are aligned. This is to ensure that the flow of energy, the flow of blood is not impeded in any manner. Because if your back is not erect, then as you sit in the posture for a longer time, you'll start developing some discomfort in your body. So make sure that your back is absolutely erect, ramped up straight. Your shoulders should be aligned and straight. Make sure that there's no tension in your shoulders. Also make sure that your limbs are relaxed. No tension in your limbs. And let the right palm rest in your left palm, and let the tip of the thumbs touch each other. And keep your head slightly tilted, as in keep your chin slightly tucked in, and keep the tongue resting against the upper row of teeth, tip of the tongue resting against the upper row of teeth, just behind them. And eyes either half closed or completely closed, whatever you're comfortable with, to cut out the distraction. If the eyes are half open, then you can direct the gaze of your eyes just down the tip of your nose in the space in front of you. And so there are 4 stages to the first part of the meditation. So you breathe out, and you breathe out long, and then you know that you're breathing out long. You breathe out, breathing long, and you know that you're breathing in long. And then breathe out short, and you know that you breathe out short. And you breathe in short, and you know that you're breathing in short. So before we go to the long breath and the short breath, just keep your breath in the normal state and just observe the breath as you breathe in and breathe out. Now, it's possible that you're not able to register your breath. So maybe initially you can start off by forcing your breath a little bit, making it a little heavier than normal, just a little coarser than normal, so that you can actually hear your breathing in and breathing out. So let your ear consciousness support your tactile consciousness, which is trying to register the breath. So maybe force your breath a little bit. Now, if you are able to register your breath, then just gradually increase the length of your breath. Keep increasing the length of your breath and take it to a point where you feel that this is the longest you can hold in. So now, if it is at its longest, start noting where your breath enters in. Ensure that your mind is placed on the middle part of the breath as it transitions through the chest. And then also register at what point it terminates and reverses. So be mindful of the entire body of the breath, the starting, the middle, and the point of reversal. And now also start observing the movement of your chest. See whether it is rising or falling, whether it's expanding or contracting. And as it expands, just note expanding, expanding. As it contracts, just note contracting, contracting. Now shift the focus to your abdomen and check the movement of your abdomen, whether it's rising or falling. If it is rising, just note it as rising, rising. And if it's falling, just note it as falling, falling. Make sure that your breathing is long. Keep noting the movement of the abdomen, rising, rising, falling, falling. Now go back to your normal breathing. Just gradually bring it back to your normal length. And as you bring it back to your normal length, keep noting the movement of the abdomen. Now gradually shorten your breath. and keep shortening it till you hit a point where you feel this is the shortest that you can do. And also note the movement of your chest as the breath becomes short. Keep noting whether it's expanding or contracting. Note the movement of your abdomen rising and falling as you breathe in short and breathe out short. Now bring back your breath to its normal state. And keep observing the movement of the abdomen. Rising, falling. Now from within the concentrated mind that you've been able to cultivate now, just think about, remind yourself that you have this wonderful human form in this lifetime, endowed with the 8 freedoms and the 10 endowments. But there's no certainty that we'll have access to these freedoms and endowments forever. We'll be separated from these freedoms and endowments at the time of death, and death is inevitable, and the timing of death is uncertain. So it's possible that we would be separated from these freedoms and endowments in the very next moment. And there's no certainty that in our next lifetime we'll have access to these freedoms and endowments. It's possible that, or it's more likely that we're born in one of the lower realms, where there's only a lot of suffering. There's a lot of suffering that we have to endure. So there's no leisure, there's no freedom. There's absolutely no freedom to practice spirituality. Also, by chance, if we are reborn through the force of some good merit from the past, if you're reborn as a human or as a god in the Deva realm, there's still a lot of suffering in the realm of humans and gods. There's a lot of suffering in the form of birth, aging, illness, and dying in the human realms, and also a lot of mental anguish one has to experience. Similarly, in the realm of gods, one has to experience a lot of mental anguish. So there's nothing trustworthy about samsara. Wherever we are born, even if it is in the higher realms, upper realms, they're not free from suffering. And yet in this lifetime, we have access to the freedoms and endowments. And we are fortunate to have been connected with the doctrine. We have access to the instructions that the Buddha gave us. And we have this wonderful discriminating awareness, intelligence, which we can use to realize the drawbacks of samsara and the benefits of release from samsara. So we should use that discriminating intelligence and aspire for release from the cycle of suffering in samsara. Yet, this mere release for oneself from the cycle of suffering in samsara is not a sufficient spiritual goal. Others would still remain behind in samsara, exposed to the forces of karma that they've created. And they will continue to suffer. And just like we wish to be freed from suffering, they too have a wish to be freed from suffering. At the moment, we do not have the capacity to help them meaningfully. So we need to aspire for a state that can give us that capacity. And we can have that capacity if we attain the state of omniscience, which is characterized by wisdom and skillful means through which we can understand the dispositions, the spiritual maturity of other sentient beings, and then customize our instructions and advice to them to help them on the path to liberation. So we should all aspire for the state of omniscience as our spiritual goal. And in order for us to develop, mature, prosper on this path to this to the state of omniscience, we need some assistance and guidance, and that comes through the three jewels: the Buddha jewel, the teacher of the path, the one who shows us the path; the path itself, the Dharma jewel, which is in the form of the scriptures, and more importantly, in the form of realizations in the mind streams of people who've advanced on this path. And the Sangha jewel, the assembly of the practitioners who cultivated some insight into this path and hence can assist others with their insights. So these are the three jewels of refuge that can help us in our pursuit of the final state, the ultimate state of omniscience. So let's take a refuge in these three jewels with a short refuge prayer. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. Namo Gurubhya, Namo Buddhaya, Namo Dharmaya, Namo Sanghaya. And with the three jewels still visualized in front of us, you can offer the seven-limb prayer. So the first limb is the limb of homage or vandana. So you can imagine that the entire space is filled with copies of yourself, and you make prostrations through the three doors of the body, speech, and mind with the three jewels. And then the second limb is making offerings. So archana. So visualize that the entire space is pervaded with beautiful offerings, and extend these offerings to the three jewels. Visualize that whatever precious you hold, you offer it to the three jewels. And then the third limb, the limb of papadeshna, so confessing your infractions and transgressions. So whatever infractions and transgressions we have committed, if we have vows and whatever vows we have transgressed, let's just confess them in the presence of the three jewels. And then the fourth limb, rejoicing in the merits of the three times of both ourselves and others. So punya anumodana, so just rejoice in whatever merit we ourselves are created in the three times, and also what the others, the merit that others are creating, have created, and will create. So let's rejoice. And then plead with the gurus to not pass into nirvana. Adeshna, that's the fifth limb. And the yashna, so make a fervent plea to our gurus to continue turning the wheel of the doctrine so that we can benefit from the instructions. And then the last limb, the seventh limb, dedicating our merit. So let's dedicate our merit to the cultivation of the mind of enlightenment, or bodhicitta. So let's just recite this short bodhicitta prayer. So I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By my practice of giving and other perfections, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, so you set good motivation for the session. Very important to begin our sessions with setting a good motivation that makes our participation in the session a little more potent and more meaningful. Yeah, so let's now proceed to the discussion that we we're going to have for the session. So some of these things that are listed here, we've already covered in the previous session. So as I said, in the previous session, we'd looked at the first two truths, the truth of suffering and the truth of the causes of suffering, or the origins of suffering. So the first 2 points, origins of suffering and afflictions and ignorance, the 6 root afflictions, and the stages of the development of afflictions we've already covered. So we'll just kind of briefly revise those. And then so for the session today, as I've mentioned, the Bodhipath presents training, which can be classified into 3 categories: the small scope training, the middle scope training, and the greater scope training. So we are looking at the middle scope training, and within that, what we need to do is we need to develop the thoughts that yearn for liberation from samsara. And in order to develop that thought, we need to get a good understanding of what is the nature of samsara. And we've seen in the previous discussion that the nature of samsara is essentially suffering. So what exactly is the general suffering of samsara, and what are the specific kinds of sufferings that we experience in samsara? So that's what we're going to discuss today. And specifically an application of that concept, which is the presentation of the 2 truths through this concept called the 12 links of dependent origination. So with a good understanding of the 12 links of dependent origination, we will have sufficient material which can help us identify what are the different afflictions that keep us trapped, bound in samsara, what are the stages in the development of those afflictions, what are the causes that go into those afflictions, and what are the drawbacks of those afflictions. So that's what we're going to look at today. So why is it necessary to look into these things, suffering and the causes of suffering? It's because as we had discussed in a previous session, this is what defines a quest in life, right? So we have this instinctive desire, an innate desire to seek happiness, and an innate desire to overcome suffering. So in order to progress towards these states of happiness and state of freedom from suffering, you need to understand exactly what is suffering and what is the state that is free of suffering. You need to understand what is happiness and what is the state that is full of happiness. So how do you understand? So that's the reason. I mean, in order to understand the nature of suffering, we need to get a good grasp of the 12 links of dependent origination. So the two truths that we saw in the previous session, I'm just revising what we'd seen in the previous session. So we'd seen the first two truths of the Four Noble Truths. So what the Four Noble Truths help us do is they help us understand the description of our present current state, and also helps us get a view of the potential future state. So our present state is characterized by being powerless against forces that lead to experiences of aging, illness, death, and then all kinds of mentally painful experiences. We have these intermittent kind of experiences of pleasure and happiness, perceived peace. Say pursued because it is contaminated peace. We'll see why exactly it is still perceived to be contaminated. And our present existence is kind of essentially characterized by dissatisfaction. So that is a description of our current state. But we also need to get a grasp on what are the causes that lead to this current state. And then on the other hand, we need to have some sort of an understanding of what describes our future potential state. So our future potential state will be described by complete, durable, lasting, permanent, meaningful happiness. And it will be described by cessation of suffering. So we also need to have a grasp on what are the different causes that could lead us to this state of permanent happiness and cessation of suffering. So what is clear from the previous slide is that there are these two causal flows. So on the one hand, we have this present unenlightened state of being and the sources that perpetuate this state. So the sources that perpetuate this state, the present state, they refer to the first causal flow. And then on the other hand, we have this final desired enlightened state of being. And then there are paths that can help us actualize this enlightened state of being. So that is the second causal flow that is being indicated here. So the Four Noble Truths essentially talk about these. So the first, so you'll find that the Four Noble Truths, they are ordered in a specific order. The first truth is the truth of suffering. The second one is the truth of the causes of suffering. So there are two pairs of effect and cause. And we've seen why that specific order is used. We'll not go into those reasons today. But just to complete this discussion, so the four truths are the truth of suffering, the truth of the causes of suffering, the truth of the cessation of suffering, and the truth of the paths that lead to the cessation of suffering. So these two pairs, right? Effect and cause. But what they do is they describe these two states, and they also describe these two causal flows that we saw in the previous slide. So what are the two states that are being described here? The current and the future state, the present unenlightened state, which is described by the truth of suffering, and the future enlightened state, which is described by the third truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. And the causal flows are described by the truth of the origin of suffering. It describes the causal flow that perpetuates the unenlightened state of being, the present state of being. And then the second causal flow is described by the truth of the paths that lead to the cessation of suffering. So the causal flow that helps us actualize the enlightened state of being. So those are the causal flows, and then the description of the two states. So that's how the four truths could be understood, as a description of our present state and the future state, and a description of the causal flow that leads to the present state, and a description of the causal flow that leads to the future potential enlightened state. So order, we have already seen why they're ordered in this specific order. And then with the first truth, the truth of suffering, we've seen that in order to understand the truth of suffering, we need to get a grasp of both the environment, the suffering nature of the environment that we inhabit, abide in, and also our own, the suffering nature of our being. So the suffering nature of the environment that we abide in, something that we covered in the previous session, that's called, the environment is called the Bhajan Lok. And the environment itself that we abide in, inhabit in, we've seen that we can think about the environment being characterized by different realms, which are essentially in the nature of different levels of consciousnesses. So the more refined your consciousness is, the more subtle or refined realm you would inhabit. So what are these realms that we inhabit? So there's something called the desire realm or the calm lok. Then there's something called the rupa lok or the form realm. And then there's the formless realm or the arup lok. So if your if your being is characterized, your mental being is characterized by a predominance of desire, then you are reborn, or you inhabit what is called the calm lok. And the calm lok itself has different kinds of beings inhabiting it. If you practice and you let your mind develop, and you develop these subtle levels of consciousnesses, which are called samadhis, then through the power of the samadhis, you're reborn as God in either the form realm or the formless realm. The formless realm are more subtle than the form realm. And the formless realm essentially is called formless because there is no gross physical form in those realms. So we covered this, just revising it. And then the Sattva Lok, the Bhajan Lok, was the environment. So what we have here is the Sattva Lok, which is the sentient world. So the sentient world, also we've seen that these 6 different kinds of beings that inhabit the sentient world. So human realm, which is where we are right now. Then the realm of animals, which is visible to us. Then there are the other realms which are not easily visible to us. The realm of hell beings, the realm of the hungry ghosts, the realm of the gods, and the realm of the demigods. So most of these beings inhabit the desire realm in the Kama Lok. In order to be reborn as a god, so the Rupa Lok and the Arup Lok, or the form realm and the formless realm, they are inhabited only by gods. And gods, devas, they come to inhabit these realms through the power of their practice of absorption, meditative absorption. So you cultivate meditative absorption, specific kinds of meditative absorptions, and you're reborn in these higher god planes in the Deva realms. So that is the presentation of the Bhajan Lok and the Sattva Lok. So this is something that I was supposed to cover in the session for today. So these 6 different realms, the realm of the sentient beings, and the desire realm, and the form realm, and the formless realm, these are all characterized by sufferings. And specifically, we had seen in the previous session also, there are these 3 different kinds of suffering. So suffering of suffering, which is dukkha dukkhata. Then suffering of change, ordinary forms of pleasure, happiness, we perceive them as pleasure or happiness, but these are essentially in the form of suffering because they are just the initial moments of a new form of suffering. So these are called the suffering of change. We discussed that in the previous session, so I won't elaborate it here. And most importantly, the 3rd form of suffering, the suffering of pervasive conditioning. So what is the suffering of pervasive conditioning? Anyone from our previous discussion, do you remember what we had discussed in the previous session? Anyone? Yeah, Dipti.
So pervasive conditions means that that the suffering is everywhere and every sentient being goes through the suffering, whether they are young or older, and that they are afflicted by suffering.
Right.
And no one, except the Buddha,
Yes.
no one is exempt from suffering.
Right. Yeah. Anyone else wants to add to this? Any other? Anything else you would want to add to this? Okay, so it's called pervasive because, as Riti mentioned, it pervades all types of transmigratory beings. So all kinds of sentient beings, uh, whatever realm you are in, you're subject to this form of suffering. It is compositional because it creates the forces that lead to the first two kinds of suffering. So it creates the forces that lead to the basis that lead to the first two forms of suffering. So as we had discussed in the previous session, this threefold division classification of suffering is actually what is called terminological uh, division. It's not a division in terms of the essence or the nature of suffering, in the sense that the last uh, category that is listed in this threefold classification is not actually suffering. It creates the basis for the first two sufferings, which are the actual, which are suffering in nature, which are suffering in essence. But this is the most important form of suffering. We need to have a very good grasp of this form of suffering in order to understand that samsara, wherever you are in samsara, it is characterized by suffering, and that the essential nature of samsara is suffering. So this is the third level of the 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 third of the threefold description of division of suffering. Yeah. Um,
Venerable, could I ask a question?
yeah. Go ahead.
So in order to get this, to be rid of this all-pervasive suffering, your karma should have been completely spent. So all your seeds, the negative, the ripening, it all should have completely spent itself out, right? Because otherwise you'll keep generating, from previous karma or some type of suffering or the other.
Right.
I mean,
that's a very important point that you raise. In fact, that's something that we're going to elaborate through our discussion. But just to answer it briefly, so think about a seed. Okay, we have this seed, say a mango seed. Yeah, you plant it, you sow it, and you water it, you put some fertilizer in the soil, and then it matures into a sapling, and then grows into a tree, and then it yields fruits. Yeah. Now think about the same seed. It is kept in your room in a box. Yeah. With the other conditions, it's deprived of the other conditions. And now, would the mango seed yield a mango fruit? It would not, right? So similarly, we have these imprints and seeds in our mind stream through the force of the karma that we accumulated in the past. But it's not necessary that all these seeds need to fructify and bear fruit. So negative actions in the past would have planted, negative seeds. Yeah, and the negative seeds would lead to unpleasant experiences. Positive actions would have planted positive seeds, and they would lead to pleasant experiences in the future. But if you deprive these seeds of these supporting conditions, nurturing conditions, and we've spoken of a specific kind of nurturing condition, the specific nurturing condition that we had spoken of was this factor called afflictions. And within afflictions, there's a specific affliction called ignorance. So if we were to kind of eliminate afflictions and ignorance, that seed would be there, but it would be rendered, impotent. It will lose its potency. It will not fructify into an unwholesome experience in the future. So we need to kind of take away those other factors that, mature, nurture that seed. So those factors are this afflictions, and within afflictions, there's the fundamental confusion that is being listed here, the affliction of ignorance. Yeah. So if you clear away ignorance, and in Buddhism we speak about a specific kind of ignorance, which is the notion of a self where no self exists. So because of this grasping at this self, you have this boundary of self and the other, and because of this exaggerated discrimination that that is inherent to your mental continuum, which perceives our entire environment as being, okay, this is what benefits the self, and this is what compromises the self or the welfare of the self. Then you're forever kind of trying to unite with those factors that would help the self, and forever trying to be repelling factors that would harm the self. So that is creating this boundary. But when we try and examine whether there's this kind of a self in our being, then we find that there's absolutely no such self. And when we have that wisdom, then that grasping at the self is taken away. And if that grasping at the self is taken away, then you won't be driven to engage in afflicted actions. Like if you do not grasp at the self, your attachment to certain things that you think will give you pleasure, give yourself the self pleasure, you will not engage in those actions. And hence your attachment will be regulated. At some point, it will be eliminated. And it's through the force of attachment, what you do is when you are attached to something, you crave for it intensely, and the craving becomes even stronger, and you grasp at that thing. You want to own it, possess it, and in the process of making it your own, possessing it, you engage in unwholesome actions. You could be maybe lying. You could probably harm somebody else. You could also go to the extent of taking somebody else's life. So it's that action that will plant a seed on your mind stream. Yeah. But it is propelled by what? Afflictions. And the afflictions like attachment and aversion. And these in turn are kind of triggered by this notion of self that we have, which is central to all our actions, fundamental to all our actions. So if you arrest these conditions, you eliminate these conditions, then the seed that you planted on your mind stream, that won't be able to nurture, it won't be able to mature into a plant and then yield a karmic fruit in the future. So that's how, in fact, this is what we'll explore in our discussion later. Yeah. Okay, so, but that's an important point that Madhavi asked. Yeah. So just because you have karmic seeds, negative karmic seeds in your mind stream, it's not necessary that you run the full course. You wait till you experience the fruit of all those actions, before you can actually progress to a more pleasant, happier state. That's not necessary. The seeds can be rendered, lifeless. And they would be there, but they would be lifeless without the other supporting conditions. So what the supporting conditions are, we'll explore that. Yeah. Okay, so that was about the truth of suffering. So the truth of origins of suffering, something that I just alluded to right now, ignorance and affliction. So these are at the root of the suffering that we experience. So these are what provide the causes and conditions for the unpleasant experiences that we have. So kleshas and karma and klesh, these are the two factors that lead to suffering. Yeah. And then within afflictions, we've seen that there are these 6 root afflictions, 5 in the form of non-views and 1 in the form of views. We won't go into detail of these root afflictions. So what we have here is a definition of all the root afflictions and the antidotes and the function. And these are the 5 different afflicted views. They're all clubbed into one category called the views. So the root afflictions, there are 5 non-views and one. The 6th one is in the nature of views. Specific kinds of views are described here. Maybe discussion that we can postpone for some other session. So the afflictions, the 6 root afflictions drive karma. 3 different kinds of karma. There's virtuous karma or non-virtuous karma, which is apunya karma. And then there is virtuous karma or punya karma. And then there is neutral karma. So based on what kind of karma you're engaging in, apunya karma would lead to suffering and pain. Punya karma would lead to positive and desirable consequences of in the form of joyful experiences and happy experiences in the future. And there is this category of neutral actions, meditative concentration. They lead to states in the higher realms, in the upper realms, in the form and the formless realms, where you're, you do not even grasp at sensual pleasures. You've given up your attachment to sensual pleasures. So you abide in states of equanimity or neutral feelings. So there are these 3 different kinds of karma. And okay, this is something that we are going to elaborate on. So let's just park this slide for the moment. So in the previous session, we'll also discuss these 10 different parts of karma that lead to karmic seeds being planted on our mind stream. So what are the 10 different parts of karma? So there are the 3 that pertain to the body: killing, taking things not given, as in stealing, and then sexual misconduct. Then there are 4 that pertain to our speech, non-virtues of speech. So lying, divisive speech, harsh words, and idle gossip. And 3 parts which lead to you engaging in non-virtuous actions of the mind. So covetousness, harmful intent, and wrong views. And for each of those karmic paths, we discussed in the previous session that you need 4 components for each of these karmic paths to be completed. So what are the 4 components? For example, for killing something, you need a basis which you need to identify as being distinct. The basis needs to be distinct from oneself. Yeah. And then there's the second component of intention, and the third component of deed, and the culminating final step. So these 4 components need to be present for karma to be complete. So the second component of intention, has these 3 subcomponents. The first one is recognition. The basis needs to be distinct from yourself, the basis that is to be killed. But you need to recognize it as being distinct and recognize it without any kind of mistake. Yeah. So unmistakable recognition of the distinct basis. That's the first component. And then coupled with the motivation to kill, so wanting to kill. And this motivation could be driven by any of the 3 different kinds of root poisons, root afflictions: attachment, hatred, or delusion. So let's say you're attached to the taste of meat, so fondness for meat, and you engage in the action of killing a certain animal. So attachment of meat, fondness of meat makes you want to kill a certain animal. You identify some animal as the basis for the act of killing, and you recognize it as being distinct and different from yourself. So that would complete the component of intention. Similarly, if you're engaging in the action of killing through anger, hatred, you don't like somebody and you want to take that person's life. So in that case, hatred would be driving that action. It could also be driven through delusion. Yeah. Delusion in the sense that somebody's told you that this kind of sacrifice sacrificing this kind of animal pleases a certain kind of deity, then you engage in the action of killing. So in that case, it's delusion, the third root poison of delusion, that would be driving the action of killing. And then you engage in the deed. So you engage in the deed by either using poison or some weapon, and you kill the other sentient being. And the final step, which requires that the other distinct being is killed before, or it dies before your own death. Yeah. So these are the different kinds of factors that need to be completed for a certain karmic path to be complete. So you can think about the 4 components for other karmic paths also: stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, idle gossip, etc. And then if you engage in a certain...
Venerable,
Yeah.
could I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so in like when you said sexual misconduct, so something like, say, unwanted flirting, or let's say unwanted, but yeah, you don't probably engage in the sexual act, but you like had a harassment, what we like in workplaces, sexual harassment is so rampant. So those are not considered, that doesn't fall under sexual misconduct. Is that right?
No, if it's a physical act, then it would...
No, if it's no physical act, but like, in workplaces, making sexual remarks about women, or, making them feel unsafe. That happens in so many workplaces today. So those are not under the
if you
category.
pass an unwelcome...
Let's say you stalk someone, like, how stalking or whatever. I mean, something that the other person, typically a woman, does not feel comfortable with. Would that be...
Yeah, that would also fall into, if what you need to just think about is, okay, the act where a person is kind of interested in somebody else, although it's not being reciprocated, and the person persists, and so that would be a mental act initially to start with. Yeah. So you start with this covetousness. So you're coveting somebody who does not belong to you. Yeah. So the mental act of coveting, it's not a proper form of coveting. So if all these 4 factors are complete there, then he would accrue the karmic action of covetousness. Yeah. And then let's say the person directs some sort of unpleasant sexual remarks towards that the other person. Yeah. Then and the other person gets offended with it. So that would probably fall in this category, in the category of harsh speech, something that is not welcomed by the other person. Yeah. Although it's taken on a different form, a sexual form, but it could still be harsh speech. And if the 4 components are complete here, then it would that person would accrue the negative karmic action of engaging in harsh speech. And if he goes further ahead, and there is some physical violation of the other person, then he would accrue the action of sexual misconduct. Yeah. So depending on the intensity of the physical action, again, it could be a diluted form of negative karma, or maybe a more pronounced form of negative karma that he accrues. So think about what door that action is being actualized through. Think about all the 4 components if they're complete, and then you can think about what category it would fall in. Okay. So based on those karmic actions, then you accrue karmic results, and the karmic results are in these 3 forms we discussed in the previous session also. Ripened result. So if you kill somebody, then that you've taken somebody's life. The ripened result of that negative karmic action would be rebirth in the lower realm, specifically in the realm of hells. And then there's the second kind of result, which is results congruent with the cause. And here you have behavior that is congruent with the cause, and experiences that are congruent with the cause. So because you shorten somebody else's life, in the future, what you will experience is a shortened lifespan with a lot of sickness. So that is experience congruent with the cause. And then you'd also have a propensity to take life. So liking for killing since childhood, that would be behavior that is congruent with the cause. And then there's the third category of results, which is the environmental results. And here you'll find that you'll be born in an environment where things like food, drink, medicine have little influence or power to cure your sickness. Your life will be punctuated with sickness, different kinds of sicknesses. And when you fall sick, the environment would be almost hostile to curing you of that. It will not aid you in the cure of your sickness or illness. So similarly, you can think about the results of the other black karmic actions. Okay, so that was what we discussed already in the previous session. So what we'll discuss today is, and we'll try and discuss the first two categories of the Four Noble Truths itself, but a different kind of presentation, and related to what Madhvi asked in her first question. So, when we speak of suffering in samsara, how does the suffering in samsara come about? So just to summarize what we've just discussed so far. So we have this underlying basis that powers the forces, that creates the forces, that creates karma, and karma then keeps us bound in samsara. So what is the underlying basis? It is this grasping at true existence or a true self, inherent self, autonomous self. Each of these descriptions actually imply a certain kind of grasping that you have at this concept of self. But what we have as the underlying basis is this grasping at itself, both in subject and the object, both in the person as well as the impersonal objects that we engage with. So based on this true existence, grasping at true existence, we have this certain misconceptions about the entity of the phenomena that we're engaging with, and we deem them to be real, as in really established, truly established from their own side. And because of these misconceptions, then you superimpose these qualities, signs of attractiveness, pleasantness, or unattractiveness, unpleasantness in those objects. And to those objects that you deem to be pleasant or attractive, you are drawn towards those, you're attached towards those. So that attachment then probably would take on the form of craving and grasping, or different kinds of afflictions. And on the other side, to those objects that you deem to be unpleasant or unattractive, you develop aversion towards those. Aversion could take on more serious forms of malice, hatred, maybe, and then you engage in unwholesome actions. So those afflictions of craving and grasping and aversion, they draw you into enacting some unwholesome actions. And those unwholesome actions, either through speech or mental or through your body, they lead to karma, and the karma then plants a seed on your mental stream. So all physical, verbal, and mental activity that we engage in, that is driven, that is powered, that is associated with an afflicted mind, leads to karma, and karma plants a seed. And that karma then perpetuates the cycle of birth and death in samsara. How exactly it happens is what the 12 links of dependent origination explains. Okay, so maybe we'll take a short break for 5 minutes, and then we'll reassemble and we'll look at what the 12 links of dependent origination are. Is that okay, Dipti? We break for 5 minutes? Yeah? Okay. So maybe just pause the recording. Rice Seedling Sutra, or the Shalistamba Sutra. and it kind of presents the fundamental principle that explains the concept behind the 12 links. So because this exists, that will occur. Because this has arisen, that will arise. Similarly, because of ignorance, the compositional factors, and so on. So what it does is it presents the causality that exists between these 12 different links. And the 12 different links itself are presented in order for us to understand how the process of rebirth in samsara happens, and then how birth then triggers other forms of suffering. So, Shali Stamba Sutra, let me just read a few things from this sutra. So it says, Pratitya samutpado nama yadidam asmina sati idam bhavati. So asmina sati idam bhavati, because this exists, that will occur. Asyota aditam utpadyate. So because this has arisen, that will arise. And it elaborates it further. So similarly, because of ignorance, through ignorance, compositional factors arise, compositional factors lead to consciousness, and so on. So that is explained in this verse here. Yaduta avidya pratyaya sanskara. So avidya pratyaya sanskara, avidya conditions samskar. So ignorance conditions, compositional factors. Sanskara pratyayam vijnanam, vijnana pratyayam namarupam, namarupa pratyayam shadayatanam, shadayatana pratyaya sparsha, sparsha pratyaya vedana, vedana pratyaya trishna, trishna pratyayam upadanam, upadana pratyayo bhava, bhava pratyaya jati, jati pratyaya jara marana, shoka parideva dukkha daurya manasya upayasa sambhavanti evam asya kevalasya mahato dukkha skandasya samudayo bhavati. So this verse explains the causality. It names all the 12 links, and it also describes the causality that exists between the different links. So what are those different links? The first link is the link of avidya. Second link is the link of sanskar. Third link is the link of vijnan. Fourth link is the link of namrup. Fifth is shadayatan. Sixth link is sparsha. Then vedna. Then you have trishna. Then you have upadan. Then bhava is the 10th link. Bhava leads to jati, which is the 11th link. And jati triggers all kinds of suffering, which is in the form of jara, maran. Jara is jwar or illness. Maran is death. So this is described here in this chart here, in this figure here. So the first link is avidya, is ignorance. The second link is compositional factors or sanskar. Third link is consciousness or vijnanam. Fourth link is the link of name and form. So the mental and the physical aggregates. So namarup. Nam implies the mental aggregates, and roop implies, suggests the form aggregate, physical aggregate. So that has these 6 doors or the 6 senses, shadayatam. Then the 6 doors, sensual doors, sense doors, lead to contact with external objects. So that's the link of sparsha. Sparsha leads to vedna, or the link of feeling. And depending on what kind of feeling you're having, it leads to the links of craving, grasping. Craving is trishna, grasping is upadana. And then it leads to the 10th link, bhava, or becoming. And then becoming triggers rebirth in samsara, and rebirth leads to a new round of suffering in the form of aging, and death. Yeah. So these are the 12 links of dependent origination. So let's just look at each of these links individually. So ignorance, ignorant of what? So ignorance is in the nature of some sort of a misperception or misknowing. And we speak of a very specific kind of ignorance, which is apprehending at a self which does not exist. So you are ignorant of how to apprehend the concept of no self with our wisdom. So that is at the foundation, that is the root of this cycle, this causal sequence of ignorance. So when we perceive persons or phenomena, what we do is we grasp at them having some sort of an essence, identity, self-existence, some sort of a nature that is established from their own side. So that is the kind of a thing that is being referred to as ignorance. It is a mistaken apprehension of a self or an essence in things where no such essence, autonomous essence, exists. And there are two forms of ignorance. There's the ignorance of the law of cause and effect. And then there's the ignorance of suchness, or the ignorance of the nature of the ultimate reality, ultimate mode of abiding of phenomena. So that is the more fundamental ignorance, and that is what drives all the other links. So that's the first link. The second link is compositional factors, or you could say karma. And we've seen briefly, there are three different kinds of karma. There's the karma which is called apunya karma, or unmeritorious karma. There's non-movable or immutable karma, and then there is meritorious karma. So unmeritorious karma is what you engage in when you're just obsessed with the pleasures and the happiness of this particular life itself. Meritorious karma would be when you crave for sensual pleasures in the future lifetimes. And immutable karma would be karma that you engage in if you have gone beyond those kind of sensual pleasures, and you do not crave those kind of sensual pleasures, but you still kind of seek some sort of a peace or bliss in meditative states. So that is immutable, because that kind of karma cannot be altered, changed. As in, if you created the cause for a certain kind of rebirth in, let's say, in one of the absorption states in the form realm, through your meditation practice, samadhi practice, then if you're going to be reborn in, let's say, the second absorption state, then you can't change that. You can't change it, and then that change would then lead to maybe you're being reborn in the third state. That doesn't happen. Whereas with the unmeritorious and the meritorious karma, you can actually change them, alter them. So let's say you accumulated enormously negative karma through a very unwholesome action in the past, and that's going to maybe lead to a lot of unpleasant experience that you would experience in the lower realms, and let's say in the hell realm. But in the course of that lifetime, you have that karma in your bank, but in the course of that lifetime, you realized emptiness. So you can alter that karma. It's possible that you experience the effect of that seed, but only mildly, in the form of, let's say, some unpleasant experience in the nature of a headache. So that potential suffering that you would have to experience in hell has transformed into a minor kind of discomfort in the present lifetime. Meritorious karma can also be changed. Yeah. So these are changeable, unmeritorious karma and meritorious karma. Immutable karma is not changeable. And these are the
Venerable,
Yeah.
could I ask a question?
Yeah, right.
So a compassionate act would be a meritorious karma, is it? Let's say feeding the poor. Is that a meritorious act? Meritorious karma?
It is a meritorious act, but if it is not fused, it is not conjoined with the wisdom of selflessness, it would still kind of yield merit, but that merit will still lead only to maybe a better rebirth in, or maybe an experience in the form of you're being blessed with more abundant resources in the future. Yeah. So he's yeah.
So what I was like, just there are so many of so many people, wealthy people, who do all kinds of they break environment, they have factories and whatever, and mines, and they don't pay their workers well, and they exploit the environment and do all kinds of unmeritorious karma kind of activities, maybe. But if then they go ahead and donate loads of money, because they have it, black money maybe, to the and whatever, then they just, so it's like buying your way to a a better result.
Yeah. So
that's possible, is it?
No, it's you're engaging in violent actions initially, right? Harmful actions initially. So that is a negative action, unwholesome action. It will lead to negative karma. Then you engage in the action of parting with some of your resources, charity. Does it become wholesome just because he is engaging in the physical act of giving something? Maybe, maybe not. Yeah. What is more fundamental is the motivation with which he's making that offering. Yeah. The motivation with which he's sharing those resources. If it is not wholesome, if the motivation is not wholesome, then that action, just like we saw for the karmic black karmic path to be complete, you need those 4 components. One of them is the motivation, yeah, and the motivation needs to be driven by an affliction. Similarly, you can speak of white karmic paths, an act of generosity, of maybe sharing your resources with others. That act would be complete only if the motivation is right. If the motivation is of wanting to spare your resources for others' betterment, for others' welfare. Yeah. Let's say the person does have some hint of motivation, some hint. Yeah. Maybe he's still primarily driven by the fact, by this desire for fame. Maybe people will say, "Oh, this guy is very charitable and he is very generous." So in that case, his motivation is not right, but maybe in some corner of his mind he's still kind of wanting to give something so that it will benefit others. So to that extent, he will accrue some positive merit. But if he's doing primarily for fame, for reasons that are going to benefit him, his own self, then that act of giving would not be a proper act of giving, and it would still kind of not lead to any positive merit for him. So what is more primary is the motivation with which that action is done. And since he's preceded that action of giving with a lot of violent, harmful acts, he will accrue a lot of negative karma. So each act will have to be kind of analyzed individually. You can't kind of have you can't analyze the whole thing as one deed. There are different elements to that process, right? So each deed will have to be inspected individually and see what the motivation was when that deed was executed. If the motivation was pure, then probably he'll accrue some positive merit. Yeah. So that's how I'll proceed. Okay, so compositional factors are motivated by ignorance. So ignorance is what drives our afflictions, and afflictions are what lead to the karma. Positive karma or negative karma, whatever it is kind of still driven by our afflictions. Yeah? So this is the second link, the link of compositional factors. So then the third link is the link of vijnanam, or consciousness. And you can think about this link as having 2 parts. The first part is the causal consciousness. And then there's a second part to it, a resultant consciousness. So you engage in a karmic act, positive or negative. The karmic act plants a seed on your mind stream. Where does it plant? It plants it in the causal consciousness. So the consciousness that immediately after the karma is imprinted is what is being referred to here, the causal consciousness. And then there's the second part of this link, the resultant consciousness. So consciousness that that manifests immediately after conception into a new rebirth. So the first moment of the new rebirth, yeah, is the resultant consciousness. That conjoins with a new form, and then you have a new so-called self of the new rebirth. So the first moment of that new rebirth would be this result consciousness. So for example, if you're motivated by ignorance of this concept of no self, and hence you're driven by some affliction, specifically this action of hatred, driven by hatred, and you engage in the negative karmic act of killing, taking somebody's life. So on completion of the karma, the entire black karmic path of killing, an imprint is planted on your mind stream. And where does it get planted? It gets planted in what is called the causal consciousness. So the consciousness immediately after this imprint is planted is the causal consciousness. And this negative karma then propels rebirth as a hell being in the future. How it does that is what the 12 links will explain. But it propels a rebirth as a hell being in the future. So the consciousness immediately after conception in the rebirth as a hell being is the resultant consciousness. So instincts of all the karmic actions, whatever actions you're engaging, wholesome or unwholesome, they get planted on the consciousness. And then there are those two links, the eighth and the ninth link of the afflictions of craving, grasping. They will come and nourish this karmic seed and make it potent enough to propel a new rebirth. So craving and grasping would then nourish the karmic seed and activate its potency, its latency. So this is the third link, the link of consciousness. Then there's the link, the fourth link is Nam Roop, name and form. So name, as I said, is a reference to the psychological, the mental aggregates, specifically the aggregates of feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness. Just think about it as the mind. Yeah. So in case the person is reborn from a womb, so the name would be a reference to his mind, and form would be the physical form that the person takes, the physical aggregate of the first instance of the fetal form in which the consciousness is placed. So the consciousness is conjoined with the physical form. So the first moment of that physical form is what is being referred to here. So name and form is the fourth link. Name and form conditions the six senses. What are the six senses? The six sense faculties of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and the mind. So from the point of having been formed till the point where one begins to completely discriminate between objects. Now, the mind, the six senses meet with an external object and some previous moment of consciousness, and it has some experience. So that entire duration, during that entire duration, this is the reference to the six senses is actually a reference to the six sense faculties in that duration. So in the desire and the form realms, the two links, name and the form and the six senses, they occur simultaneously. The moment form manifests, the six senses also kind of, the first moment of the six senses manifests. Whereas in the formless realm, there are no links of form. So no five physical senses. So there's no gross physical form in the formless realm. So there you can't speak of the eye consciousness, the eye faculty, or the ear faculty, or the nose faculty, or the tongue faculty, or the body faculty. So these are the six senses. Then through the six senses, you develop contact with the external world. So once the previous link of the six senses is developed, one begins to completely discriminate between objects as being either pleasant or unpleasant or neutral. When the three conditions manifest, what are the three conditions? You have an external object, you have some sense faculty from one of the six sense faculties, and a previous moment of consciousness which is driving your mind towards that object. So when these three conditions unite, the contact link manifests. So contact would then lead to the seventh link, which is the link of feeling. And feeling, as you know, you could have a feeling of happiness, you could have a feeling, a pleasant feeling, or a neutral feeling, or an unpleasant feeling. And when do you have a pleasant feeling? It's when you come into contact with a pleasant object. When do you have pain? When you come in contact with an unpleasant object. When do you experience equanimity? When you are in touch with a neutral object. So that's the seventh link, which is the link of feeling. Now, based on what feeling you've experienced, you would generate craving towards that object. That is the source of that feeling. So you could have craving, which is in the nature of wanting not to be separated from the happy feelings. Or you could have a craving, which is in the nature of wanting to be separated from an unpleasant experience, from suffering, and clinging to that separation. You want that separation to be perpetuated. So that's craving. So when ignorance is present and contact occurs with an external object, then ignorance and contact, they serve as some sort of a contributing condition for the feelings to arise. And when feelings arise, feelings in turn produce craving. If we do not have ignorance, we may still have some sort of feelings, but craving will not develop. Let's say there's some object, external object, where there's no possibility of you possessing or owning it. It's just shared. So there's no way you can appropriate it as being your own or being mine. In that case, you'll have a pleasant sensation of experiencing that object, but there's no way craving would manifest in that situation. So this is the eighth link, craving, and craving would then take on a more heightened kind of form, a more enhanced form of what is called grasping, upadan. So craving is trishna, feeling was vedna. So vedna leads to trishna, trishna leads to upadan. Grasping is heightened craving, where you want to possess the source of pleasure, or you want to be completely separated from the object which you deem to be the source of your pain. So when craving increases, we desire the object, we want to own the object, we want to possess the object, and you do things to acquire it, to possess it, to own it. And there are these four types of grasping that are described. So there's grasping at sensual objects, which is what we all engage in on a regular basis. Grasping at wrong views, again, something that we do very frequently. Grasping at wrong kind of ethics, and grasping at wrong assertions. So specifically the assertion of an autonomous self. So different kinds of grasping. And that the fourth one is at the root of our misery. So that was the ninth link. The ninth link, the eighth and the ninth link trigger the 10th link, the link of becoming. So the compositional factors link, the second link, compositional factors, it plants an imprint on your mental continuum, some karmic seed on the mental continuum because of some karmic action. And that seed, it is nurtured by the eighth and the ninth link, which is the link of craving and the link of grasping. It's nurtured, that seed is nurtured, and it's taken to a point where it is potent enough to propel oneself into a new future rebirth. So that state is the link of becoming. So the point where it's become potent enough to propel a new rebirth, to the point where it actually propels a new rebirth, and the first moment of consciousness arises. That is the link of becoming, or bhava. So the entire 12 links, they're also called as the bhava chakra. So becoming is the 10th link. And the 10th link leads to rebirth, which is the 11th link. So this link extends from just after the activation of the karmic seed, when it becomes potent to propel a new form, until just after the conception into a new rebirth. So it serves as the basis for our being conceived in one of the four different types of rebirths, whether it's through the womb or egg, or the other forms, it is miraculous rebirth or through heat and moisture. And then once you're reborn, the very next moment, the process of aging starts. So aging and death would be initiated. So the process of dying has already started the moment the 11th link is activated. So aging is the maturing of your physical aggregates, and death is the destruction or the cessation of the life force that sustains those physical aggregates. So these are the 12 links. So we need to get a better view of these 12 links in order to understand them better. So these 12 links can be classified into 4 different categories. What are those 4 categories? So there are what is called projecting factors. So some links act as projecting factors. Some links act as actualizing factors. Some links are the projected factors, and some links are the actualized factors. So what are the projecting factors? So ignorance, compositional factors, and the first part of the causal consciousness, they are what are called the projecting factors. They project the name and form and the 6 senses and the other links. The actualizing factors are the 8th link of craving, the 9th link of grasping, and the 10th link of becoming. They act as the causes for you to experience the actualized factors, which are the 11th and the 12th link, which is the birth link and the link of aging and death. So the third category, projected factors, I just alluded to it. The projected factors would include the second part of the 3rd link, resultant consciousness. Then you have name and form, the psychophysical aggregates. Then the 6 senses, contact, and feeling. And then the 11th and the 12th factors are called as the actualized factors. So projecting factors, actualizing factors, projected factors, and actualized factors. And you can see that I've used a color code here. So the first 3 links are the projecting factors. The next 4 or 4.5, the first 2.5 are projecting factors. The next 4.5 are the projected factors. The next 3 are the actualizing factors. And then the next 2 are the actualized factors. So how do you understand these projecting factors? So you can use the analogy of the seed, what Madhvi had referred to in her question. So the projecting factors, what do? They yield a planted karmic seed or karma that can potentially issue forth the entity of some karmic rebirth in the future, karmic fruitional ripening. So what are the projecting factors? There's the first one, ignorance. Then the second one, compositional factor. And the third one is the causal consciousness. So what are they doing? They have this karmic seed planted and take it to a point where it has the potential to issue forth a new rebirth. So ignorance is the first seed, first link. So it is you can think about it as the sower of the seed. Ignorance is the factor which sows the seed. So it's the sower of the seed. The seed itself is the second link, the compositional factor link, karmic action, motivated by ignorance. And earth, the third link, the causal consciousness, is the earth which holds the seed. So the karmic action plants, the karmic action is motivated by ignorance, and it plants a seed into your mind stream in the causal consciousness. So causal consciousness is in the nature of this earth which holds that seed, which holds the potency of the accumulated karma. And that potency could lead to a new rebirth in the future. So these are the first 2.5 links, which are the projecting factors. And then there are the actualizing factors, the 8th, 9th, and the 10th link. So what is the function of the actualizing factors? They yield a mature, a ready to sprout karmic seed. So the first 2.5 links had planted a seed, but not ready. It had the potency to yield fruit in the form of a new rebirth, but it wasn't ready to sprout the fruit. Yeah. So here the actualizing factors, 8th, 9th, and the 10th link, they make the first karmic seed ready enough to be able to sprout a, a result. What is the result? The result is in the form of a new rebirth. So the actualizing factors yield a ready to sprout karmic seed. So initially you just had a seed. Here you're having a ready to sprout karmic seed that is certain to issue forth the entity of a new rebirth, karmic fruitional ripening. So here you can think about the 8th and the 9th link, craving and grasping, as the nourishers of the seed, as the fertilizer of the seed. Yeah. So craving and grasping provide the manure, the heat, and the moisture to nourish the seed, the karmic seed, and activate its potential, its potency, and take it to a point where it is able to produce a result. And then there's the 10th link, the becoming link. It is in the nature of the carer of the activated seed. So what does it do? It takes the activated seed to the point of conception into the new rebirth. So that is the 10th link, the carer of the activated seed. It's the becoming link. So these are the 3 actualizing factors. And then you have the 4.5 projected factors. So what are the projected factors? The projected factors is that thing which, when actualized, is designated as being born, or being in the process of aging, or being in the process of dying. So what are these factors? What is that thing? It is the name and form that you assume. It is the resultant consciousness of the new rebirth. It is the 6 senses that come along with the name and form. And it's the links of the contact and feeling. So these are the projected factors. Projected is a reference here. It implies having created the effects. And what are the effects? The effects are in the form of resultant consciousness, name and form, 6 senses, contact, and feeling. And these effects are conducive to actualization. Once the actualizers of craving and grasping, they are present. So these are the 4.5 projected factors. And then there are the 2 actualized factors of rebirth and aging and death. So the aging, the actualized factors is a sprout that has grown from the karmic seed, actualized by the actualizing factors of grasping and craving. So rebirth and aging and death, these are the actualized factors. So actualization occurs by means of what? By the nourishment, the empowerment of the latent karmic propensities, which were planted by the 2nd link in our mind stream, in the causal consciousness. So there's this latent karmic propensity which is planted by the 2nd link, nurtured by the 8th and the 9th link, held by the 10th link of becoming. And that is actualizing the form of a rebirth. And rebirth then triggers aging and death. So these are the 4 different categories of the 12 links: projected factors, projecting factors, actualized factors, actualizing factors. And how do they unfold in one cycle of the 12 links? So the causal sequence of the 12 links, it of course starts with ignorance first. Ignorance is what is motivating karmic action. The karma then plants a seed in the consciousness. That seed is ripened by, nurtured by craving and grasping. Craving and grasping nurtures and ripens it to a point where it is good enough, potent enough to yield a new form. So that is the link of becoming. The becoming link holds that ripened, ready to issue a new rebirth seed, ready to sprout seed. And then it sprouts in the form of a new rebirth. So name and form comes along with the 6 senses. They in turn facilitate contact and feeling. And along with name and form, the processes of the actualized factors of rebirth, aging, and dying are activated. So this is the sequence in which the causal sequence would manifest. Yeah, they are listed in a different order, but when they they get activated, and one cycle is completed, it would be in this sequence that their cycle is completed. So to take an example, you start with the projecting factors, right? So the first link is the link of ignorance, of avidya, specifically the ignorance about the mode of abiding of phenomena or suchness. Yeah. So you are ignorant of the no self property of phenomena. And because of this ignorance, you engage in an action. Your action is still driven by this grasping at a self. You engage in some meritorious action, maybe some meditative stabilization, or just a regular kind of meritorious action. So that leads to the second link of karma being activated, and karmic action. That meritorious karma plants a seed. Where does it plant it? In the causal consciousness. So the first part of the third link. So the karmic seed of that meritorious action is planted in the consciousness, causal consciousness. So these are the three projecting factors. So these three projecting factors create this karmic seed. And the karmic seed is then nurtured by the links of craving and grasping. So you have this seed of the meritorious karma. It's going to yield a positive experience in the future. So you kind of make it more potent through this affliction of craving and grasping. So you say that you develop this mental state that it would be nice to have the sensual pleasures of the God realm. And then you kind of enhance that craving further, and you say, I want the sensual pleasures of the God realm. So craving and grasping in these forms would then nurture that meritorious karmic seed and take it to a point where at death, you have the karma that is certain to propel a new rebirth in the realm of gods. So that would be the 10th link, the link of becoming. So these three, 8, 9, and 10th, are the actualizing factors. And these actualizing factors, acting on the projecting factors, would lead to the projected factors of the resultant consciousness in the realm of gods, the name and form in the realm of gods, the form of Deva, 6 senses of the Deva, and then contact and feeling. And it would also initiate the actualized factors of rebirth in the realm of gods. And with rebirth would start the process of aging and dying. So this is how the cycle the causal sequence would unfold. So how many lifetimes do we need to complete all the 12 links?
Venerable, could I ask a question?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So actually I have 2 questions. So one is that when you take the vows to become a monk or a nun, does that mean then that you are actually taking care of the actualizing factors? Because you are working, I mean, not that you can't do it without the vows, I'm sure you can, but like it just makes it easier for you to deal with the actualizing factors. Would that be okay to say that?
Yeah, that would be a correct way of looking at it. So vows, what they do is prevent you from engaging in unwholesome karmic actions in the form of physical karmic actions, verbal karmic actions, or mental karmic actions, because we have all these vows which constrain you from unwholesome physical actions, or mental actions or verbal actions. So they erect some sort of a boundary. So you do not engage in those negative actions. So they are acting at 2 levels, both at the level of projecting factors, but and also at the level of the actualizing factors. So you're also kind of regulating your craving. You're also regulating your grasping, and the more you regulate it, the more subdued it is, the less chance of craving and grasping have of nurturing some negative karmic seed from the past. Yeah. So it would act at both levels, not just at the level of actualizing factors, but also at the level of projecting factors.
Okay. And the second question is, when you talk about the God realm, is it actually a realm that we humans can't see, or does it just refer to a birth where you have access to a lot of sensual pleasures, and a lot of, maybe say, wealth, and or fame and sensual pleasures? Like, some people have better access to it than some others who are probably born as beggars, or something like that. Would that constitute a God realm? Someone who has lots of access to fame and sensual pleasure or whatever, or is it an actual place?
No,
or
it's
something?
the actual realm. It's the basis, the physical basis of a god is entirely different from the physical basis of a human. So within the human realm, also you can, as you just mentioned, you can think about existence which is characterized by abundance of resources, uh, and a state of being where you're deprived of resources. But that comes through the force of a different kind of karma. What we are talking about here is projecting karma that projects a new form. What you're referring to is what is called completion or establishing karma. So even though, for a beggar and a rich person, the propelling karma is similar in the sense that there was a karmic seed which has the potency to propel a new human rebirth, and it propelled a new human rebirth for both cases. There's another karma which is acting along with the propelling karma, which is called the completing karma, or the establishing karma, and that is establishing one person in abundance, and it is establishing the other person in the state of deprivation. So there's another kind of karma. But the realm of gods is an entirely different realm. It's you uh, have a different basis in those realms. It could be the gods are born in the desire realm, they're born in the form realm, also in the formless realm. So what kind of merit you accumulated, on the basis of that, you would either be born as a desire realm god, or a form realm god, or a formless realm god. But you're right in the sense that they're beings with much more superior kind of karma, finer bodies, more pleasurable experiences, sensual in the desire realm, and in the other realms, it's the bliss of meditative absorption in the form realm and the formless realm. Yeah. Okay, so how many lifetimes do we take to complete the cycle of 12 links? So at the least, you would need 2 lifetimes at the shortest. How does that happen? So the actualizing factors of grasping, craving, and becoming, the 8th, 9th, and the 10th links, and the actualized factors of rebirth and aging and death, they would occur. So they are always separated. They're also always, part of 2 lifetimes. But they would occur without an intervening lifetime. So in this, let's, for example, take this lifetime. So you've created some karma in this lifetime, planted a seed on your mind stream, and that gets nurtured at the time of death by the 8th, 9th, and the 10th link of craving, grasping, and becoming. So that creates the potency for a new rebirth in, let's say, a god realm. And in the next lifetime itself, you're reborn as a god. And with the rebirth in the next lifetime as a god, the projected factors of the resultant consciousness, name and form, sense consciousnesses, sense spheres, feeling and contact, and then the actualized factors of rebirth as a god and aging and dying, they would be actualized in the next lifetime itself. So the 2.5 projecting factors and the 3 actualizing factors are in this lifetime, and the other projected factors and the actualized factors in the immediate next lifetime. So you see the 12 links get completed in over a span of 2 lifetimes. Yeah. But at the longest, it would take 3 lifetimes. How is that? So again, let's say you created some positive karma in this present lifetime, planted a karmic seed on your mind stream. Towards the end of this lifetime, the 8th, 9th, and the 10th link, they nourish this karmic seed, take it to the point where it is good enough to propel a new rebirth as a deva. It's possible that it could ripened result could be actualized in next lifetime itself. So that would be the 12 links being completed over two lifetimes. But let's say this karmic seed was planted in a previous lifetime, some millions of lifetimes before, yeah. And then in this lifetime, towards the end of that this life, the links of craving, grasping, and becoming invoke that karmic seed. They ripen it, they nourish it, and then in the next lifetime, you're reborn as a god. So what is happening? The projecting factors are part of one lifetime in the past, maybe million lifetimes in the past, and then the actualizing factors of grasping, craving, and becoming are part of this lifetime, the second lifetime. And then the projected factors and the actualized factors of rebirth and aging and dying are part of the third lifetime. Yeah. So the 12 links get kind of actualized over 3 different lifetimes. So that's the duration that you would require to complete the 12 links. The longest that you would require to complete the 12 links. So three lifetimes at the longest, or 2 at the shortest. Yeah. And then there's a further classification of the 12 links into what is called suffering or affliction or karma. So you can see the first link of ignorance is actually an affliction. And then you also have the affliction of craving and grasping listed in the 12 links. So these are all, they belong to the category of affliction. Then there are links in the form of karma. So the second link, compositional factor, and the 10th link of becoming, they are part of the link of karma. And then the rest of the factors are in the nature of suffering. So consciousness is in the nature of suffering. Name and form, of course, is suffering. Then there is 6 senses. Name and form is, we had seen the third kind of suffering, the suffering of perversion conditioning. Then 6 senses suffering, contact and feeling is suffering. And then rebirth and aging and dying are, of course, the suffering that we experience as suffering of suffering, the first kind of suffering. So this is these are the 3 categories that the 12 links belong to when you classify them as affliction, karma, or suffering. And then there's another 2-fold classification of the 3 links. We'll just wind up this discussion and then we'll end the session with a short meditation. So a further 2-fold classification of these 12 links. You can classify them as either being belonging to the first truth, the truth of suffering, or the second truth, the truth of sources of suffering. So what are the links that belong to the truth of suffering? The third link, consciousness, then name and form, 6 senses, contact, feeling, and birth, and aging and dying. These are all links that belong to the truth of suffering. And then there is the other category, the second truth, the truth of the origins of suffering. The origins of suffering, as we had seen, are in the nature of karma and afflictions. So what are the links that are in the form of afflictions? First one, ignorance. And the 8th and the 9th one, craving and grasping. These are afflictions. And then the links that are in the nature of karma or compositional factors, the second link and the 10th link of becoming. So these are part of the second truth, the truth of the origins of suffering. Okay, so maybe we'll skip this. So as you see, the root of this causal sequence is this link of ignorance. So ignorance, that is what triggers our karmic actions, and the karmic actions then plant a seed, and then they lead to all kinds of rebirths in the future. So these karmic imprints will drive many, many, many new karmic cycles. So one karmic seed from its from the vast store of imprints that we have on our mind stream gets activated by the links of craving and grasping at the time of death. So whatever is the heaviest form of karma that we have at the time of death, this is uncontrolled. If you haven't trained in meditation or in spirituality, if the process unfolds naturally, then one karmic seed from the vast store of karmic seeds that you have on your mind stream, the heaviest form, the weightiest karmic seed, that gets activated by craving and grasping at the time of death. And then that leads to a new rebirth. So hence it's very important to pay attention to the kind of mental state that we are in at the time of death, when the death is approaching. So our state of mind at the time of death steers a new course of rebirth. So we could be reborn as a human, as a god, or maybe in the lower realms. So if the actualizing factors of craving and grasping, we can regulate these, then it's possible for us to kind of chart a new course in the next lifetime. So it's absolutely critical for us to pay attention to the mental state that we are in as death approaches. And there are lots of meditations that we do in our tradition which help us acquaint ourselves, familiarize ourselves with the process of dying, so that we are aware of what kind of mental states manifest during that process. And then we can, through whatever training we've got, we can regulate those mental states and ensure that some virtuous state manifests at the time of death, and that virtuous state would then lead to a virtuous rebirth in the future. So okay, so let's stop here. This was supposed to cover, but we don't have time today, so we'll continue in the next session. Okay, so before we end, let's just go back to our meditation that we did at the start of the session and see how we can relate whatever discussed in our discussion today, and see how we can apply it in meditation. Okay, so let's go back to the Anapanasati meditation. So go make sure that you have a proper posture. Back erect, arms relaxed, palms in the meditation posture, meditation mudra, and tongue rested against the upper row of teeth, chin slightly tucked in, and eyes either half closed or closed, whatever you prefer. And start by observing your breath. So observe as you breathe in, observe as you breathe out. And then observe the chest as it expands and contracts. And start noting the movement of your chest expanding as expanding as it expands, contracting as it contracts. And then observe the rising and falling of the abdomen. So keep noting without a break rising, rising as it rises, falling, falling as it falls. Now, it's very possible that you're not able to lock in the mind on the moment of the abdomen. So if it wanders, just keep tracking your mind. If it's wandering, just note it as saying wandering, wandering. If you are meeting somebody, just keep noting as meeting, meeting. If you're talking, then note it as talking, talking. If you're imagining something, just note it as imagining, imagining. It's possible that after being in a certain position, posture for a long time, for the last 2 hours, it's possible that you're experiencing some discomfort in your physical being. There's some pain that you're experiencing, or maybe some sort of hotness that you're experiencing somewhere. So if that's the case, just note that sensation too. Paining, paining. So keep tracking your mind. Don't lose track of the mind. Just keep noting whatever it is doing. So when you're mindful of the mind, whether it's wandering or meeting or talking or seeing, looking or smelling, whatever it is, you keep noting uninterruptedly. And when your noting is uninterrupted, you develop what is called mindfulness of the mind, or chitta anupashana, chitta anusmriti. When you are aware of the breath, you develop what is called the kaya anusmriti, or mindfulness of the body. If you're observing the sensations and you're tracking them, and if you're mindful of them, then you develop what is called the mindfulness of feelings, or Vedananusmriti. Keep observing the mind, keep noting it without a break. What you'll observe is that there is stream, just a stream of these mental events, mental episodes. There's this continual stream of atomic mental events. a preceding moment of mind causing a subsequent moment of mind. And if you enhance your concentration, it could lead to a state where you will realize that each of these moments of mind, the moment they arise, the causes for its cessation are also built in. So arising and ceasing, arising and disintegrating is happening simultaneously. It does not need the intervention of any external condition or cause. So if you isolate these atomic mental episodes, you'll realize the arising and the disintegrating is simultaneous. And if you have that realization, you'll realize the impermanent nature of all phenomena, impermanent nature of the mind to begin with first. And if you observe it more intensely, all these atomic events, mental events, they do not need the intervention of an external being. They're not coordinated by any being. Previous moment of mind is causing the subsequent moment of mind, and the stream continues. So apart from these mental events, episodes, mental atomic minds, is there an autonomous, separate, distinct being coordinating it? There's no such being. We have this perception or illusion of a being which says that I am breathing, I am noting, because we have a slightly skewed perspective of this process. If we have a more refined, zoomed in kind of perspective, then you will note that these are only atomic events linked through the process of causality. That if you stand back and have a more disconnected perspective, then you'll have this illusion of a being conducting the process. So when you rid yourself of this illusion, then you have this realization of the reality of no self or selflessness. And if you realize these signs of these minds, the individual moments of minds, the signs of impermanence and no self, you realize what is called the mindfulness of Dharma. Dharma Anusmriti. So you find that within this one meditation, you can actualize the four bases of mindfulness, the four foundations of mindfulness, and also actualize the three kinds of trainings. While your mind is engaged in mindfulness of these bases, four bases, it's not engaging in any harmful action towards others. So you're practicing the higher training of adhishila or morality. As your concentration is enhanced, you enhance your practice of meditative stabilization or samadhi, adi samadhi. And as you develop a perspective of impermanence and no self, you develop your practice of prajna, wisdom. So adi shila, adi samadhi, and adi prajna, the three higher trainings. So now as you do this meditation and you develop reasonable levels of mindfulness, at some point when your concentration is enhanced, you'll find that you will start experiencing some sort of rapture or bliss. But when you manifest this kind of rapture, you need to analyze it. Even that rapture is a moment of mind, and it is impermanent, and it does not have the basis to yield meaningful happiness, lasting happiness. So you understand its impermanent nature. You also understand its no self nature. And you do not develop any kind of craving for that kind of rapture. You do not develop any kind of grasping toward that kind of rapture. If you did, then that would become a cause for you to be reborn maybe in some state where you experience a similar kind of rapture in the future too, but that would still be part of samsara. So through the reflection of impermanence and no self, you're not engaging any unmindfulness of the state of rapture, the mind of rapture. You not engage in any kind of craving and grasping at that kind of rapture. And that would ensure that the link of becoming is not activated. Similarly, if there's a lot of pain that you're experiencing, you do not develop any strong aversion and heightened form of aversion to that experience. And hence the 10th link of becoming would not manifest. Because even the unpleasant moments of minds are impermanent. If you observe them, are very mindful of those moments, you'll find that the pain subsides and just disappears. So you can do this meditation later in your free time. Make sure that you stay with one object and try and enhance your mindfulness. And then you can invoke some of the things that we learned in the discussion that we had today. Okay, we'll stop the meditation. We'll just end the session with a short dedication. So due to the merits of these virtuous actions that we have created through our participation in this discussion, a lot of time we have spent, almost 2.5 hours. You've also expended a lot of energy in the process. So you invested a lot of patience here. So through that patience, you accrued a lot of merit. So due to the merits, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all sentient beings without exception into that enlightened state. May the supreme jewel bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow, and may that which has arisen not diminish, but increase more and more. Okay, we stop here. Thank you, all of you, for your time.
Thank you very much, Venerable Khalden, and for coming and teaching. This was very intense, and I'm sure we have a lot to meditate on. And thank you. you all for joining, and please join me in wishing Kaldenla and all our teachers a great examination.
Thank you very much.
All right, Venerable Kalden, have a great day.
Okay, have a good day. Yeah, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. Okay.
Thank you, Venerable.
All you should go to bed.
Okay, bye, Nikon.
Bye.
Thank you, Venerable.
Bye, Aman.
Bye, Martin.
Thank you, sir. Bye, ma'am.
Thank you,
Bye,
Venerable Kalden. Thank you, Dee. Good night, everybody.
Good
Yeah,
night.
thank you. Dee.